The full-time whistle has just blown in Twickenham. The Grand Slam is done. Congratulations, England. A well-deserved victory. A truly puzzling performance from the All Blacks. Some bizarre substitutions were made. Some bizarre game plans were implemented. You know, it's appropriate I wore this Undertaker t-shirt. This was the funeral for the 2025 Grand Slam. This All Blacks team promised so much, and in the macro picture, I still feel they are trending in the right direction, but this was just a tough lesson today that they're going to have to metabolize and learn from. This was reminiscent of the Springboks putting us away in Wellington in the sense that we simply didn't have an answer for the power, the strength, the brutality that we faced in the second half. When England was able to get one-on-one matchups with their big men against a couple of our more lightweight players, they made real inroads. And this was just a suffocating classic test match with drop goals, with rolling mauls, with territorial kicking. This was pure rugby. This was old school rugby. And England played it better today. And so while I'm absolutely gutted that we're not going to get this Grand Slam, I can't really argue with the result. I feel the result was fair. All Blacks got out to a blistering start, 12 points up. That turned into 13 points down. Kind of like the Scottish fightback last week, except England was always going to bring much more firepower, particularly with that Palm squad waiting on the bench. As the All Blacks went into the sheds, up by a single point at halftime, I had a sick feeling in my stomach. I just thought, that is not enough. Not with the onslaught that we know is coming. Proved to be true. So this is a devastating one. Statistically, it's been a pretty good year. We're kind of back to that historical All Blacks winning percentage. But the meltdown in Buenos Aires, the worst ever loss in Wellington, and now a good old-fashioned kick in the guts from the English in front of a raucous Twickenham crowd. That's really going to stop us from papering over any cracks. Maybe a Grand Slam would have just been, I don't know, false hopium? Maybe now we'll have to examine some of the deeper issues in our game if we're going to make a serious run at this World Cup in 2027. So there could be some long-term benefits from this. We're not going to have that feel-good buzz over the New Zealand summer or the American winter, as it is for me. And, you know, maybe ultimately that's a good thing. We're going to have to dig deep, re-examine our game, go back to the drawing board a little bit. So, look, somber mood here. You know, if you're an English supporter, I'm sure you are feeling fabulous and well-deserved. You know, you haven't beaten the All Blacks at Twickenham since 2012. That's a long time between drinks. And you went into this game with a lot of confidence. Some would say a surprising amount, given that the All Blacks have been winning consistently since that World Cup semi-final in 2019 in Japan. Well, the confidence was not misplaced, as it turns out. So savor this win. You deserve it. There is a bigger picture here, which is that England, I think, really have cemented their status now as a true top dog. 10 wins in a row. They needed a big scalp, though. They needed a Springbok scalp or an All Blacks scalp. They got one today. It's funny, last year I think I predicted the All Blacks to win pretty much, you know, every single game. Listen, I'm biased. My heart bleeds black. Every single game except last year I said I think England will win at Twickenham. Well, it turns out my prediction was a year early, but my gut feeling was right. This is a really powerful English team with the best depth I've seen in a long time, and I believe they are on track to make a real run at the Rugby World Cup in Australia. All right, guys, let's break down the full game. The game started somewhat predictably in the magnificent Twickenham atmosphere. The English were bringing so much line speed, absolutely thunderous hits. Fai'ainganuku gets stripped, and then straight into the box kicks from England. Box kick from Mitchell, the halfback. Next thing you know, George Ford kicking long. It seemed a little bit odd. I felt that there were times early on where England had the All Blacks on the ropes a little bit. They could have kept the ball in hand. They went for the kick a couple of times. The short kicking game really did damage, but in general, the long kicking game from the English only gave possession to the All Blacks and allowed them to counterattack. In the 6th minute, Lord got the first All Black pick of the game. He stole a line out. This was a theme today. The English lineout had an absolute meltdown, particularly in the first half. Now, obviously, it didn't impact the final score here, but that was a troubling area for England. The All Blacks absolutely had the wood on them at line-out time. Happening in the 12th minute, another disruption of the English line-out. This time it was Scott Barrett. He batted the ball off of Coles with his left mitt. That was pretty pleasing to see. In the 13th minute, Fai'ainganuku got over the line for the All Blacks. A low pick and go, and this came off the back of a break that he was a very instrumental part of. Drew England offside. All Blacks were able to recycle. They made it look kind of easy here. They really showed a lot of power in this opening quarter. England were wobbling. George Ford puts the ball straight out on the restart. The All Black scrum is looking rock solid at this point. Cam Roigard nudges a kick into the 22. The All Blacks are kicking so well at this point, and I did think back to my prediction for this game, where I felt that even though a lot was being made of the kicking power and acumen of the English, I thought that the All Blacks could do a number on them with their kicking game. And they really did when Cam Roigard was on the field. I think his box kicks were terrific. I think when the All Blacks played territory, it did wonders for them. And you look at where they dominated England at times in the first half of this game, it was the territorial kicking game and holding on to possession. They had 95% possession, I believe, from minutes 10 to 20. That is pretty extraordinary. And their kicking game was keeping them down the right end of the field. And the English were just giving up space so easily on the wings. It was kind of extraordinary. Far too narrow on defense. You had Will Jordan playing a big hand in this. He had a very long run. You had Quinn Tupaia sending a long bounce pass. And ultimately, Codie Taylor is the beneficiary. He goes over the line. So you had 2 tries in 3 minutes from the All Blacks, an absolute explosion of offense. This was the purple patch for the men in black. If only it could have lasted. In the 21st minute, you get the third line-out pick. This time it was Ardie Savea. So 3 different players robbing the English line-out. That is a big work on for the men in the white and red. But a couple of worrying signs. You start to see England ripping open the All Blacks a few times. Ben Earl, as expected, had a great line break, and he fed Marcus Smith. Faye Waboso, he went very close, but then Coles was held up over the line by Cam Roigard. So some good scrambling D by the All Blacks in the first half. And you just felt like some points were coming for England. It happened in the 24th minute. Ollie Lawrence, way too easily, off a scrum, down the blind side, bumps off Leroy Carter. I mean, that one is unfortunately going to live rent-free in Carter's head for a very long time. He's done some magical things for the All Blacks this year. Last week he had the trip in Edinburgh. This week he had that. Yeah, look, really coming back down to earth. Ugh, you know, bad, really bad. And just some signs here that if England could create one-on-ones, use their might, use their sheer physicality, there might be some fruit to be had from that. Carter did try to atone. He actually had a beautiful chip and chase down the touchline, but he got too isolated. He held on. They looked at the tape, though, and we went back. There was actually a knock-on from Lawrence, so this turned into a New Zealand opportunity, a blindside scrum. The ball ends up with Fai'ainganuku, who low moves his way to the try line. I could be a little critical of some of his handling errors, but at times his brute force really got the All Blacks going forward. And it looked like the All Blacks were going to get over the line, but they just get turned over. England's realizing they need something. It doesn't need to be pretty. George Ford in the 37th minute and the 39th minute lays on drop goals. And again, you know, I predicted this in my preview that England is really good at getting from, say, you know, meter 60 to meter 30. They can own that halfway line. Guys like Ben Earl giving that go forward. They were just able to get into All Blacks territory pretty easily. And look, full credit to them for going for the drop goal. That did start to swing the momentum of the game, tighten it up a bit, and sent a warning to the All Blacks. Score going into the sheds was 11-12. The All Blacks, they had a 1-point lead. Would you think I'd be happy? No, I wrote here in my notes, bummer. Late first half fade. Normally, the All Blacks save their fade for the third quarter. I actually want to show you guys this amazing statistic, and I want to give full credit to Gregor Paul, one of my favorite journalists, and he was in my film Cup of Dreams. He gave one of the best interviews. Love this guy, read him religiously, but take a look at this statistic here. You see how the All Blacks dominate. Quarters 1, 2, and even 4 this year. You know, the fourth quarter fade is somewhat a thing of the past. If you look at the macro picture of 2025. But the third quarter has been a disaster. Look at the negative points. So in Alcoholics Anonymous, they talk about swapping the witch for the bitch. I guess we've swapped the fourth quarter fade for the third quarter fade. And that's what worried me at halftime, that we're up by a point. I'm nervous about this third quarter just based on the trend line of the All Blacks form this year. And I was right to be nervous, because we did get another third quarter fade. It started in the 41st minute. We got a yellow card. Now, admittedly, it was a pretty harsh one, but Codie Taylor did play the ball on the ground, just got a fingertip to it, squirted out of the arms of Marcus Smith. Initially, it was missed, but the ref called it back. We're down to 14 men. The gallows humor kicked in for me, and I was thinking, well, at least we trained for this last week. You know, we had 3 yellow cards to prepare us for this. Only had the one today. England would get one later. But really, did not want to see cards for the All Blacks today. We did a pretty good job, you know, withstanding the English onslaught. It didn't really turn into a costly passage, but you wonder if it did just tire us out a wee bit, exhaust us a little bit. Doubling up multiple efforts on defense, making a bunch of tackles. Now we see some pretty interesting substitutions from both sides. Luke Cowan-Dickie comes on for England in the 43rd minute. In the 44th minute, Roigard is off. What on earth? Why? I need answers. Tamaiti Williams is on. Samisoni is on temporarily. Codie Taylor does come back after his yellow card. But the English are starting to do better at the scrum. And in the 48th minute, the English win a scrum penalty against the 7-man New Zealand scrum. This was where they were making the numerical advantage count. In the 49th minute, England easily shred New Zealand up the middle, way too easily, in fact. George Ford goes under the posts. It was so easy that it actually looked a bit fishy. They call it back. Turns out that there was an English offside at line-out time earlier, which rendered everything else that followed irrelevant. But essentially, the All Blacks earned a penalty. So quite a reversal there, and what looked like a 23-12 lead to England actually went back to 18-12 to England. In the 54th minute, a brilliant 50-22 from George Ford got the English down the right end of the field just as Mackenzie comes on and replaces Barrett. And there was something symbolic about that. George Ford in full flight, just as an ashen-faced, anguished-looking Beauden Barrett walks off the field, head down. I don't know what happened here, guys. But the most important thing was that the English scored next. Dingwall absolutely shredded the All Blacks up the middle off a line out, so they go out to 25 points to 12. So what's just happened is that the All Blacks have gone from a 12-point lead to 13 points down. That is a 25-point reversal. This is the problem with the 2025 All Blacks. When they're in full flight, they look fantastic. Sometimes they look as good as the All Blacks have ever looked on attack. They don't sustain it for long enough. They have these costly lapses, and today's was particularly costly, cost them a Grand Slam. Wallace Atiti has replaced Parker at this point. And the All Blacks are, starting to get a little bit of go forward, maybe turning the momentum around. They get penalty advantage in English territory, but they don't take the 3 at this point as we're heading towards the 1 hour mark. Instead, they do a quick tap, and it ends with a whimper as D-Mac knocks the ball on in heavy traffic. Now, I know I'm being an armchair athlete here. Easy for me to say. Sometimes the All Blacks gamble, and they win, probably more often than not, but you just had to feel that maybe they needed to get some points on the board. 3 might have helped them there just to wrestle the momentum back. Yes, they needed to try at some point, but the momentum was with England. And just as England's drop goals kind of stemmed the All Blacks' momentum in the first half, you just felt we needed a 3-pointer to settle things down. The All Blacks end up getting 3 bites at the cherry. They have 3 lineouts. In fact, Ben Earl goes off for illegally pulling down an All Blacks rolling maul. So a yellow card to England. Finally, on the 3rd line-out attempt, Lord wins it at the front for the Kiwis. It turns into a maul, and Jordan is able to put the ball down under the posts off a beautiful D-Mac ball. Now it is 25-19. That is the 45th try for Will Jordan. For sure heading towards Dougie Howlett's 49 record. Look, if Jordan plays against Wales next week, might be a slightly happier hunting ground than this. Even so, momentum still feels like it's with England. The All Blacks have a mountain to climb here. A few moments later, Will Jordan actually gets isolated on attack, though, and it is that man, Henry Pollock, for England, the blonde-haired, 20-year-old, blue-eyed dynamo who is just so emotional. I mean, he really wears his emotions on his sleeve. He was so visibly pumped up. He was just jazzed to get that first game against the All Blacks, and he was rewarded here. He got his body into a really nice position over the ruck, and, the ref blew in his favor. The All Blacks, they're still picking off the English line-out, but now they're having to scramble a little bit after an English penalty in the 73rd minute. George Ford made no mistake this time, kicking for the posts. He had those two costly misses last year. You felt like he did not want to miss an important kick tonight. But the All Blacks now are scrambling. They need to get 2 scores to get back into this game and lead it. Of course, it breaks down. That's what always happens, almost always, when a team is firing 50-50 balls. Pollock, that man I just mentioned, he gets a boot to it. He chips it ahead, and number 14, Robuck, slides in. It is 33-19 to England. That is the final score. Horrible stuff if you're a Kiwi. So I do have some other general thoughts here. I mean, let's talk about Scott Barrett's leadership and the decision-making. I just think there were a couple of occasions here where the All Blacks took a quick tap instead of leaning on their set piece. And in retrospect, not a good idea. England was canny enough to kick a couple of drop goals to just squeeze their way back into the game when it was getting away from them in the first half. I think that's great. Some people will criticize a drop goal. Oh, it's not entertaining enough. I'm not one of those people. That is pragmatic. Get the points any way you can. Well, some of the quick taps we took were just possession frittered away. Wouldn't have hurt to take a 3-pointer on an occasion or two when we got penalties. So I think that really, the All Blacks do have this DNA, to use the buzzword of the moment, where they want to attack at all costs. And yet I think calmer heads could have prevailed in the second half. And I think looking back, Barrett will definitely rue the decision not to lean on the scrum, to go for those quick taps, to not take the 3 points. You look like a hero if you roll the dice and it goes your way, but Lady Luck wasn't on the side of the All Blacks today. Simon Parker did provide some pretty good physicality in the first half. He's very good defensively. I think he just offers a little bit more height in the line-out, and we did benefit from that today. That would be one advantage he perhaps has over Wallace Satiti. He seems to be a very good lifter as well as winning some possession himself, so he is certainly one to persevere with for the future. Probably, the most outstanding forward really was Peter Lakai. I mean, he would have racked up about 100 carry meters. A lot of damage was done in the first quarter, and he got the All Blacks on the front foot repeatedly. So if we're looking for positives here, the growth of his game has been really pleasing. We need to talk, too, about what's going on with Beauden Barrett. I mean, guys, something wasn't right about this performance today. Was he carrying a niggle? Something going on in his leg. He wasn't even taking the penalty kicks for the sideline. Jordan started doing those. He looked short on confidence. He looked tired. And he was pulled early, which was bizarre. When you have your first choice halves pairing, fit and available, you'd think they'd be playing deep into the game, but the sight of Roigard and Barrett going off was really troubling, and I just wonder if there's something going on with Beauden Barrett. This was a very off-color performance. He's really run the cutter so well in general on this Northern Hemisphere tour. So I'm curious if there's something that we don't know about at this point going on with him. Lester Fai'ainganuku, look, he's offering a lot of physicality, but the handling errors are there. They seem to be just a part of his game that can't be removed, and we have to weigh up, is it worth that physicality? I mean, for me, on balance, it is, yes. He's getting go-forward ball, he's getting over the advantage line, but I think some work has to go into not overplaying his hand and just really focusing on the fundamentals of ball retention. If he can clean that up, he's going to be one of the best wingers or midfielders on planet Earth. But right now, some of those errors are bringing down my mark out of 10 for him. You know, this was more like a, I don't know, maybe a 5 or a 6. And, you know, he's a guy who should be getting really 8s and 9s. Billy Proctor certainly has put some of his defensive frailties from earlier in the season behind him. I was looking at the stats here. Actually, the All Blacks' top tackler today. He made 14 tackles, and a couple of them were absolutely crucial, stopped potential tries. So, again, you know, we haven't quite found the next Conrad Smith, but signs that we should persevere with him. And I would imagine that he might start again against Wales, get another bite at the cherry. Leroy Carter... Unfortunately, that bump off from Ollie Lawrence is going to haunt him. I don't know if I want to go as far as to say that might have sealed his All Black career, and not in a good way. But that was that's a glaring one. That's one for the low light reel. That is the trade-off with Carter. He's not the biggest player on the field. He's an athletic sevens type player. Yeah, his scramble defense is great. He really covers well. He gets all around the field, but occasionally he will be exposed with a one-on-one. A little bit lightweight there, and that did harm the All Blacks. But I think the main takeaway is that after really being excellent in the last 2 games, the All Blacks bench did not deliver. So much was made of the Palm squad, and rightfully so. That was a much better performance from the English reserves. Samisoni Takiaho certainly didn't do better than Codie Taylor. Things looked a little bit nervy at line-out time. Tamaiti Williams also came on and didn't really control the scrum as he has in previous games this year. If anything, it felt like the English were really getting the upper hand at scrum time. Pasilio Tosi didn't really make an impact. Sam Darry, you know, look, an unfortunate late call-up due to the fact that Fabian Holland was out. Crook, you know, still not convinced about this guy. Obviously, we're missing Patrick Tupo Vai. For me, at this point, while there's promise there, you know, he is low down the All Black depth chart at lock, particularly with the rise of Lord on this tour, which has really been the feel-good story of this tour, is that depth at lock coming through with Josh Lord, really staking a claim to potentially start for the All Blacks next year. That's how good his form has been. But Darry, a day to forget for him. And then you look at Cortez Ratama. You know, he was fine, but it's just baffling. Why do you take off your best back? Why do you pull Roigard? I just cannot understand the rationale for that. Anton Lienert-Brown, he was the kind of guy you needed to bring on if we were ahead and we were defending the lead. And I almost feel like maybe that was how the decision was made, to have him there on the bench. And we probably needed a bit more explosiveness. Maybe we did need a Rieko Ioane out there. A little bit more pace, a little bit more explosiveness. Easy to say in retrospect. Anton Lienert-Brown's more like a guy that can finish out a tight game, not necessarily someone who's going to inject a lot off the bench. And Damien McKenzie, look, after last week's fairy tale, very much back down to earth. So, you know, low marks for the All Blacks bench, high marks for the English bench today. So, to wrap it up, really a dismal day. And, you know, it's the leadership that didn't really stand up. You know, I feel that Scott Barrett, as I mentioned, questions have to be asked about his leadership in this game. Beauden Barrett, schoolboy errors, you know, not getting penalty kicks over the touchline, just simple stuff, really cost us today. I felt that New Zealand is trending in the right direction. Still feel that way. But only in the macro, bigger picture of the Rugby World Cup cycle do I remain hopeful. For this year, I think that the 3 losses really have exposed there's a soft underbelly in this talented team. And we've got to find a way to stay cohesive for longer. Otherwise, we're just going to be a team that has brilliant individual parts, but isn't playing like that tight-knit unit that those great All Black teams of the past have been. So the identity is still emerging here. We need a good win over Wales and a rethink over the summer. All right, guys, let me know your thoughts. Sorry this isn't better news if you're just tuning in and learning about the result, but congratulations to England and their supporters. A very well-deserved win. Commiserations to my Kiwi brethren. Be back for another one real soon. Until then, please like, subscribe, send this video to someone who loves rugby. I'll catch you later. Bye for now.